Hi everyone, and welcome to this latest episode of my alphabet of hair, and we're looking at the letter T, which is for tribal hair. As far as we all know, since human beings began, we've had hair on our heads. Different races have different types of hair, obviously, but as far back as the 15th century, different tribes used to use hair to show off their social hierarchy and status. Hair played a significant role in the culture of ancient African civilizations, symbolizing their family background, social status, spirituality, tribe, and also their marital status. Hair was also a symbol of fertility. If somebody's hair was thick, long, and neat, it symbolized that they were able to bear healthy children. However, if somebody were in mourning, for example, they would pay very little or no attention to their hair at all. Some ancient communities believed that hair helped with divine communication, and this is the reason why hairstyling back in the day was only entrusted to close relatives. Some people believe that should a strand of hair fall into the hands of an enemy, then harm would come to the owner of the strand. But it's not just Africans who would style their hair according to their tribe, so too did Native American Indians, South Americans, the Maoris, Japanese, and beyond. So in this video, I'm going to take you on a hair journey around the world, looking at different cultures and their hair. I just want to say now, so please excuse me if I pronounce anything wrong. This is more to do with linguistics and languages. With certain names and terms, the words will appear at the bottom of the screen, so should I be saying or pronouncing it incorrectly, then at least you can see the correct spelling. Let's first look at Native American Indians. The ancestors of Native Americans arrived in the now named United States from Asia via Beringia at least 15,000 years ago, possibly even earlier. A variety of societies and cultures then developed. Native Americans were hugely affected by the European colonization of the Americas, which began in 1492, and their population rapidly declined, mainly because of diseases, warfare, which included biological warfare, territorial confiscation, and slavery. More than 570 federally recognized tribes live within the US, which is about half of which are associated with Indian reservations. Until 1871, they lived independently from the British and Spanish settlers until 1924, when the Indian Citizenship Act granted US citizenship to all Native Americans born in the United States who had not yet obtained it. These Native American Indians chose different hairstyles based on a style that was popular in their particular group or village. The styles define them as members of a particular clan or society. Some of the styles that were popular among Native Americans looked pretty different than the styles that were popular with the Europeans that had arrived. The most common Native American women's hairstyles were simple, long flowing hair, either with or without a fringe, or long plaits, sometimes two or just a single one, and some of the women painted horizontal stripes on their hair or dyed the centre parting a bright colour. In the southeast, many women from tribes known as the Creek and Chickasaw wore their hair on top of their heads in buns or top knots. In the southwest, women from the Navajo and Pueblo tribes often wore their hair tied behind their heads in a kind of twist best known as a chongo, the Pueblo word for this hairstyle. Some southwestern Indian women preferred to keep their hair cut to shoulder length. One distinctive tribal hairstyle for women was the elaborate squash blossom or butterfly whorls worn by Hopi maidens. To create this hairstyle, a young woman's mother would wind her hair around a curved piece of wood to give it a round shape, then remove the wood frame. Only unmarried young women wore this complex hairstyle. Another unique tribal hairstyle was the board or bonnet hair, popular amongst Seminole women in the 1800s. The Seminole are Native American people originally from Florida, and today they mainly live in Oklahoma with a smaller amount in Florida. Seminole women made their hair into the disc shape by fanning it over a tilted cardboard frame, which then stayed in place under their hair. Traditionally, most Seminole women wore their hair on top of their heads like other southeastern Indian tribes, and today the blackboard style is almost never worn. However, it can still be seen on Seminole palmetto dolls, which are usually made with this distinctive hairstyle. Seminole Indians, along with many other nations, believe that hair must be protected and out of reach from those who will use your hair against them for anything bad. Any tribal customary do's are reserved for special occasions in contemporary society. The most common Native American men's hairstyles were long flowing locks, long braids or shaved heads, but there were many different versions of each of these basic hairstyles. The hair held great symbolic importance for men in many Native American tribes, especially in Western tribes like the Sioux and Blackfoot. Many in these tribes only cut their hair to show grief or shame, and often wore the front part of their hair in special styles, including A, the pompadour, which was stiffened with grease or clay so that it stood up, B, forelocks, which is one long strand of hair hanging down between the eyes, and C, small braids or top knots arranged in various shapes. In eastern tribes like the Lenape and Iroquois tribes, most warriors shave their heads except for certain sections of hair. So with them there is A, a scalp lock, which is a single lock of hair on the crown of their head, B, the tonsure, which is a fringe of hair around the head, or C, a roach, which is a stiff crest of hair running down the middle of the head, and then D, the roach hairstyle, which is often known as a mohawk or mohican. Native American men would often wear artificial roaches too, which were made of brightly coloured porcupine or deer hair. Men with shaved heads and men with long braids would both wear artificial roaches. Most Southwest Indian men originally wore their hair in a chongo style similar to the women's. Shoulder-length hair with a cloth bandana around it became a more popular style in the Southwest by the 1800s. Other southwestern men twisted their hair into long hair rolls, resembling modern dreadlocks, which they stiffened with clay and then painted. On the northwest coast and northern California, men sometimes wore top knots on top of their heads. Northwest coast men also wore moustaches and sometimes beards, while men in most other Native American tribes kept their faces clean shaven. So that's American Indians. So now let's head south of the US and take a look at hair amongst the Mayan tribes. During the height of the classical Mayan civilization in Central America, which was between 250 AD and 900 AD, hair was used to indicate a person's rank. Ordinary people cut their hair short, while the elites of the group sported long ponytails. These elite women styled their hair into braids woven with ornaments and ribbons when it was a special occasion, whilst the men took the drastic step of burning the hair of their fringe off to create their own receding hairlines, which permanently damaged the follicles to create the effect of a higher forehead. This was done to supposedly create a more elongated profile, something that the ancient Mayans considered the height of beauty. They also took this idea to the extreme by binding boards around the heads of their children as they grew to create a long cranial shape and slightly cross-eyed, evidence of which can still be seen in the skulls of dead Mayans from that period. Warriors sported a tuft of hair on the left side of their heads, which was moved to the right side once they'd killed their first enemy in war. As fascinating as this is, it also came with its downsides. Hair bindings and ornate hairstyles pulled tight and weighed down with ornaments could cause traction alopecia. Meanwhile, the burning of the hair on the forehead would permanently damage the scalp, leaving scar tissue and bald patches of skin where all the hair had been lost. In rural Guatemala, the indigenous Maya culture is still very much alive and visible, with the traditional garments that are still worn today. In some villages, the traditional indigenous dress includes an intricate hair wrap. Hair worn like this is called a tocoil, and tocoils vary by region, and the hair accessories can range from small headband-like ribbons to large fabric headdresses. They also sometimes embellish with sparkly garland tassels or hand-beaded details. Now let's head east to Africa. Hair still plays a significant role in the culture of ancient African civilizations. You get dreadlocks from the Himba tribe of northwestern Namibia, braids and beads from the Fulani tribe of the Sahel region and West Africa, and then you have the Okra dreadlocks of the Hama tribe in Ethiopia. I was first introduced to the Himba tribe a few years ago when I discovered a book in a bookshop called Himba. I fell in love with all the hairstyles that they wore and was hugely inspired to reappropriate some of these styles into my work over the last few years. The Himba tribe are the indigenous people of Namibia, and their population of roughly 50,000 people live largely in the northern part of the country. Both the Himba men and women are accustomed to wearing traditional clothing that befits their living environment in a hot climate. Himba people, especially women, are famous for covering themselves with what's known as an otige paste, or otige paste, which is a mixture of butterfat, goat hair and ochre pigment. This protects them from the extremely hot and dry climate as well as insect bites. The mixture, which is often perfumed with the aromatic resin of the Amazumba shrub, gives their skin and hair a distinctive orange characteristic, as well as texture and style. This paste is considered a highly desirable aesthetic beauty cosmetic, symbolising the earth's rich red colour and blood, which is the essence of life. Hairstyles and jewellery play a significant role among the Ova Himba, indicating age and social status within their community. An infant or child would generally have his or her head kept shaven of hair, or with just a small crop of hair on the crown of the head. This gets sculptured, and for young boys, into one braided plait down the back of the head. Teenage girls wear braid strands or dreadlocked hair that hangs over their faces. Doing this symbolises that they've entered into puberty. Some young girls may also have one braided plait extending forwards, which means that they are actually one of a twin. As puberty hits boys, they continue to have one braid, while the girls have many otige textured plaits, sometimes arranged to cover the girls' faces. During the day, the plaits are often tied together and held parted back from the face. Now, women who have been married for about a year and new mothers wear an ornate headpiece which is known as the arembe. This headdress is made from sheepskin. Young women who are ready for marriage tie their dreadlocks to reveal their faces, and unmarried young men continue to wear the one plait down the back of their head. Then during marriage they will wear a cap or head wrap and unbraided hair underneath. Widowed men remove the cap or head wrap and expose the unbraided hair. The Ova Himba has also got accustomed to using wood ash to clean their hair. So we're now moving across the water to New Zealand. In Maori culture, their clothing portrayed a range of information about the status of the wearer and the region where they were from. However, because Maori society was communal in nature, there was a strong sense of group identity. If the leader of a group was well dressed, it reflected on all the members. A variety of hairstyles were common as they depicted social status and rank within their communities. These hairstyles are believed to reflect mythological origins, like that of the Atua or god known as Rahua, who was believed to have tied his large locks of hair in bands on the top of his head. According to Maori belief, the head is considered the most sacred part of the body, so it's not surprising that a fancy head adornment using whalebone combs, albatross feathers and the now extinct huia, plus carved accessories made from dead birds and sometimes even human bones, were all very much prized. In times of mourning, leaves from local plants were worn around the head as a mark of respect, which is a tradition that still continues to this day. When a person's hair was frazzled, it was a sign that they were in a state of tapu, which means turmoil. Mame rapa is the unkempt hair of a person in mourning. Individuals had been known to keep their hair untidy and frazzled until the death of their loved one. Other hairstyles include the ruru, which consists of a lock or plait of hair from the left temple while the rest of the head was shaved. And then there's one named Rhino Makawi, which describes a wavy, frazzled lock of hair, kind of like a dreadlock. Then, of course, we have the twisted or knotted hair worn on the top of the head. This style was given various names, including the tiki, putiki, tiki-tiki, tuki, kuku and rahiri. Many of these names describe the unique hairstyles. Early journalists have translated many of these just into the term top knot, because unfortunately much of the traditional local knowledge of hairstyles has been lost. Beyond the hair there is adornments, and there's the heru or comb. Now, they would dress the hair using oils or kakao, which is a highly regarded red pigment extracted from clay. Heru were carved from various types of wood or bone, and you can still often see them being worn today by men and women. The oils were cold pressed from various berries like the titoku, and they were also perfumed. Among the Maoris, the act of hair cutting is sometimes part of a religious ceremony. The cutting of the hair was often one of the final ceremonial acts. The inner meaning of this act has never really been explained. So now we're moving to the Pacific Islands, which includes Hawaii, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga, the Solomon Islands, Nauru, Federated States of Micronesia, Kiribati and French Polynesia, which all had many tribes, and some of them still exist to this day. In Hawaii, sketches from the artist John Webber in the 1770s show that both Hawaiian men and women wore their hair long and short. Now, an argument could be made for or against long hair in the cultural sense, as both had a place in Hawaiian society. The cut known as the oki mahiole is known to be a cut used for those in mourning and those who are practitioners of certain gods and goddesses, etc. Shoulder-length hair or braided hair tended to be associated with Ku, which is considered one of the 4 great gods. Now, dyed hair, particularly reddish or white, and long flowing wavy hair tended to be associated with the goddess known as Pele. In a person's life, these styles can change, often due to the influence of Christianity. Sometimes this shift was marked with a new haircut. In the Hawaiian mourning cycle, cutting your hair was highly symbolic. Chiefs would cut their hair when they lost a battle and would also cut their hair in specific forms to show that they're in mourning. Now, a haircut known as the oko it's very difficult to say based on the spelling, which means to cut off all the hair at the back of the head and leave the hair only in the front, was also a mourning haircut, often associated with chiefs who lost a child. The papa iole and irregular rice bowl type of haircut was a cut often associated with chiefs who were in mourning for their colleagues. The oki kikepa haircut, which is cutting or shaving one side of the head, was also a ritual haircut for mourning. The oki poe or crew cut was another ritual haircut done in times of mourning. These haircuts apply to both sexes. Now, Samoans wore their hair accessories made from naturally occurring materials such as seashells, coconut and kwa. Samoans love to decorate their long dark flowing hair with flowers, brightly hued, or berries and leaves too, mixed with the high scented leaf of the masui. Both the men and women would adorn themselves. Sometimes they would lighten or darken their hair by using lime burnt from the coral rock, leaving it in their hair all day until the colour changed. So that was the Pacific Highlanders, and now we're going back across the Pacific to Australia and the Aborigines. Aborigines are the indigenous Australians, just like the Native American Indians are to the US. And for those of you that don't know, my great-grandfather was Aborigine. Fact. A lot of people think I'm of a Mediterranean background when they look at me, but no, I promise you I am 1/8 Aborigine. It's generally believed that Aboriginal people are the descendants of a single migration into the continent of Australia. A group of people that split from the first modern human populations to leave Africa over 50,000 years ago. A study shows that sea levels were so low that Australia and New Guinea formed a single continent. Humans moved from Southeast Asia onto this landmass, some settling in what is now known as New Guinea, others travelling farther south into Australia. They kept to the coastlines until they reached southern Australia 49,000 years ago. But once this great migration was finished, a recent new study suggests that the ancestors of today's Aborigines settled right down into their new homes for tens of thousands of years. There are also Aborigines who made it to Canada. Thousands of years before any Europeans arrived in Canada, there were still people living there. Aboriginals, also known as natives, which is the First Nations, Indigenous Canadians or Canadian Indians, are the modern day descendants of the first human inhabitants of North America. By the way, the word Aboriginal has been in the English language since at least the 16th century, and it means first or earliest known indigenous. It comes from the Latin word aborigines, derived from ab, which means from, and origo, which means origin or beginning. The word was used in Australia to describe its indigenous people as early as 1789, and unlike many other tribes, it's not a word that describes where they come from. In Canada, the Aborigines would decorate their hair very much like the North American Indians, with braiding, buns and decorative headdresses, etc. Some Aborigines are strangely blonde also. Naturally blonde hair is often associated with white or Caucasian people. However, there are groups of dark-skinned people who have naturally blonde hair, one of these groups being the Australian Aborigines. Australian Aborigines were not overly renowned for their hairstyles. It seems that they preferred to leave their hair in its natural texture and just keep it off their face either with headbands or plaits. The women would grow their hair long and sometimes make headdresses for certain ceremonies, and the men would leave their hair quite unkempt and wild, occasionally tying a headdress around it. Next, let's move to Asia and Japan. Most people only know about the geisha traditions from Japan when it comes to style and hairstyles, but, and that's a very big but, there is also oiran, who were the highest ranked sex workers in the Yoshiwara district. Many people confuse oiran with geisha, or the other way round, but they are totally different things. Geishas are Japanese women who entertain through performing the ancient traditions of art, dance, singing koto or shamisen performances, and are distinctively characterised by their wearing of kimonos and oishiro makeup. However, an oiran was a high-ranked sex worker in the Edo period. Edo is the period between 1603 and 1868, when Japan was under the rule of the Tokugawa shogunate and the country's 300 regional daimyo, who were powerful Japanese feudal lords who ruled most of Japan from their vast hereditary land holdings. Oirans would see clients in the old pleasure quarters. Girls that would become oiran would be educated from when they were kamuro. Now, kamuro were the small girls who attended the great courtesans of the Yoshiwara. They were brought into service at the age of 5 to 9, and they would run errands for their older sisters and attended her when she met with clients. The streets of Yoshiwara were lively with brightly dressed little girls going to and fro, calling on vendors, delivering gifts, trading jokes with the locals, buying snacks for their older sisters to eat hurriedly between clients. The hairstyle of the oiran is called the date hyogo. In a time when both dress and hairstyles were becoming simpler, the oiran's costumes became more and more ornate, culminating in a style with 8 or more pins and combs in the hair, and many layers of highly ornamented garments derived from the early Edo period. They would insert hair ornaments or sticks known as kanzashi, which were used to hold hair up or to add a touch of oriental flair. They would do 3 on each side of their head, which was 6 in total. 2 pieces of kanzashi made out of coral and 3 pieces of kanzashi made out of tortoise shells. The hair would be woven into 2 knots on the side of the head. Now, the anti-prostitution laws of 1958 dealt the Orians their final blow, hence why you no longer see them in Japan anymore. Now, geishas wore their hair in what is known as a shimada hairstyle, similar to a chignon. Its modern usage is mainly limited to geisha and bridal wear, mostly now in the form of a wig, but during the Edo period the preference among women with beautiful long flowing hair made way for these styles with buns at the back of the neck. The trend started among courtesans and kabuki actors, but soon spread to fashionable wives and then became a general fashion worn by ordinary women, especially by girls in their late teens. The hair is gathered together at the crown of the head and a small portion of the bun is sectioned off to point outwards. To create these hairstyles, the hair was usually divided into 6 sections: the 2 sides, the front, the back, the nape of the neck and the centre, all of which were eventually brought together in the centre. The centre section was secured with string or wire frames, then pins and combs were inserted to hold the style in place. An elaborate version of the shimada that became popular in the mid-Edo period, which is the 18th century, was called the torobin shimada. It featured wide wings at the side to replicate the look of a lantern, and the name torobin shimada means lantern shimada. And that's Japan, so let's go across the water to China. In ancient China, young women wore their hair down or in simple styles to show that they were not married. Maidens traditionally kept their hair in braids until their 15th birthday, when they then went through a coming of age ceremony called the gili. Now that's the hairpinning ceremony to you and I. During this ritual, they washed the girl's hair, combed it into a twist and held it together with a pin called a ji. I think that's how you say it. A girl who completed the ceremony was considered an adult eligible for marriage. Since long, lustrous black hair was a sign of health and considered attractive, these young women who never cut their hair styled it in a way to show their hair off. A simple hairdo from the Han Dynasty, 206 BCE to 220 CE, consisted of a long, low ponytail, tied loosely so that the hair framed the face on both sides and showed off their forehead. Hair was parted down the middle as they favoured symmetry as a way of beauty. Alternatively, girls could leave most of their hair loose while gathering a portion of it into a twist or a bun at the back of their head, which was held in places by pins or other dangling ornaments. This gave the wearer an elegant profile while showing off her locks. But once a girl was married and busy with family life and household affairs, she no longer needed to show off her hair. Married women in ancient China wore their hair tied up in a variety of styles ranging from the practical to the elaborate, depending on social rank and fashions. The simplest was a knot of hair tied at the nape of the neck. Most elaborate versions were from the Tang Dynasty, which was 618 to 907 CE, including wigs, ornamental combs, pins and even fresh flowers. Another simple married updo would be combing the hair up into a high ponytail near the top of the head, then carefully arranging it into a large, loose bun so that it sits in the centre of the head above the forehead. For Chinese men, the Q or Q, depending on how you spell it, was a hairstyle worn by the Jurchen and Manchu people for many years. It was later required to be worn by the male subjects of the great Qing dynasty. Hair on top of the scalp was grown long and often braided, while the front portion of the head was shaved. This style of hair led British soldiers to refer to them as long-tailed Chinamen. The queue was traditional to regions in and around China, adopted from the early 17th century. Early Chinese immigrants to Melbourne in the 1880s still wore the queue hairstyle. The Han Chinese liked long hair as a sign of strength, energy, strong sex drive and beauty. And that's it, viewers. I've covered as many tribes and cultures as I can think of, and it's funny because now I'm done, I've realised that we're all still a bit tribal in our ways when it comes to hair, makeup and dress sense. We also all copy each other if we're into certain things with hair, makeup and clothes. And still now, when a lot of women get married, they want their hair to be a certain way, and after they get married, they sometimes want to cut their hair off. They also want to do this after a breakup. Men have their looks and tribes too. Nothing's really changed. It's just that there's a lot more cross-pollination now in how people dress and look. These days there's a lot of conversations about cultural appropriation too, but my opinion on that is if you like something, wear it, have it and do it. No race, creed or culture officially owns a hairstyle. We all wear different kinds of clothes now that have been inspired by other cultures, and it's like saying you can only wear jeans if you're American. A particular look might be associated with a certain race, but sometimes if you dig deep enough, you'll find that there was another race or culture doing it before them anyway. It's only hair, guys, so enjoy and have fun with it, and don't always feel like you have to copy to fit in. See you later. If you like this video and want to see more, then you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is here, and you can also follow me on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter.